Hey everyone, today we're going to dive into a topic that has unfortunately become one of the biggest debates, especially political debates, which is transgender people and public restrooms. This issue is so important because it's just filled with myths and misinformation and lies. We're going to talk about the so-called predator myth, the absurdity of bathroom laws, the real harassment that people are facing, and the hypocrisy of labeling trans people as dangerous. I'm going to be breaking down the myths and lies, share some facts, talk about why we're even talking about this in the first place. And yes, I'm going to pull no punches because frankly, I'm just tired of seeing fear and bigotry disguised as concerns or safety measures. So this is something you hear all the time, which is, well, if you let transgender people or trans people use bathrooms matching their so-called identity, somehow it's opening the door to sexual predators. Now, let me be very clear. This argument is just absolute nonsense. There is no basis for this on facts or data. It's just based on fear. So fear of the unknown, fear of what's different, and honestly, this is just the same type of fear that's been used in the past to justify discrimination throughout history. Think about it. So in the 50s and the 60s, people used the same identical arguments to oppose desegregation. People living in fear would say, well, we can't let black people use the same facilities as white people because it's just going to lead to more crime and assault. And it was a lie then, and it's a lie now. Let's be honest here. Where's the proof that having restrooms that are inclusive to trans people actually lead to an increase in sexual assaults? I'll tell you, there is none. Nada. Cero. Studies like the one from the Williams Institute at UCLA have shown that there is no link between having inclusive bathroom policies and an increase in risk of sexual assault. The data just doesn't support it. It's a lie. But here is what is actually happening. Trans people are being harassed and attacked simply for trying to exist. There is a 2015 US transgender survey, and in this survey they found that 12% of trans respondents had been verbally harassed in restrooms, and 1% had been actually physically attacked. So let that sink in for a moment. These are people who just want to use the bathroom and go about their day, but they're being met with violence and harassment. I think about this a lot when I hear people say that they supposedly care about safety, in quotation marks. Now, whose safety are we talking about here? Because it sure isn't the safety of trans people. So if the data doesn't support these fears, where do these myths come from? Why do they keep existing? Well, I think it comes down to a couple of things. First, ignorance. A lot of people just don't know what it means to be trans. They don't understand that gender identity is about who you are and not what's on your birth certificate or your sexual organs, which some people seem to be obsessed with. Second, there's this underlying discomfort with anything that challenges traditional norms or the status quo. For some people, trans rights just feels like a threat to the way they've always understood the world and frankly have been told that the world needs to be, especially by Christians. And instead of just grappling with the discomfort, they latch onto these fear-based arguments. And then there's a whole political spin and aspect of all of this, of course. Let's be real, this isn't just about bathrooms. It's about control. It's about using trans people as scapegoats to push an agenda of discrimination. So when I see lawmakers introducing bills that restrict restroom access or ban discussions about gender identity in schools, I don't think it's because they actually care about safety. It's because they want to create an environment where trans people feel unwelcome and invisible. And let's not ignore how all of these lies and misinformation are spread online. I've seen countless videos online, Instagram, TikTok, of people filming trans people in restrooms. And the goal of these videos is so obvious: to make people feel like trans people don't belong there, that they're a danger. But here's what's really interesting about all of it. In every single one of those videos, and you've seen them, nothing is actually happening. All you see is a trans person in a restroom. That's it. They're not bothering anyone. They're not harming anyone. Let me tell you what is happening. The person holding the camera is the one harassing and violating someone else's privacy. So let me ask you, who is the real threat here? Trans people were really some kind of danger in restrooms. Wouldn't we be seeing all kinds of videos of them doing something harmful and harassing people and sexually molesting people? Where are the video of trans people harassing or molesting anyone in restrooms? Spoiler, there isn't any. What we see is videos of straight cisgender people who are harassing trans people. And when you look at the actual statistics, they back this up. Studies show that the majority of sexual assaults in restrooms and public spaces are committed by cisgender heterosexual men, or men, since some people have such a huge issue with saying cisgendered. Men are committing sexual assaults in restrooms and public spaces, not trans people. Yet nobody is proposing laws to stop them from using the restroom. Why? Because this is never about safety. Now, let's talk about the ridiculousness of legislating where trans people should go to the bathroom. Here's the thing, no matter what restroom a trans person uses, someone is going to have a problem. Let me include this following video to show you this point. Also, imagine a trans man, someone who was born as a female or assigned female at birth, but now identifies and lives as a man. He looks like a man, dresses like a man, has a beard. In all senses, most people would think he's a man. So, according to these bills, and according to people who back up these bills, that person should use the women's restroom, right? Because that's their biological sex. That's how you were identified when you were born and someone saw your vagina and said, yep, it's a woman. But let's be real. What would happen if that trans person who now looks like a man walks into the women's restroom? What do you think is going to happen? People are going to have a reaction. People are going to freak out. They will see him as a threat. Now, if on the flip side, that same trans man uses the men's restroom, the bigots still won't be happy. They're going to say, he is not a man, he doesn't belong here. So what's the solution? Where is this person supposed to go? The truth is, this is not to protect anyone. This is to make life impossible for trans people. It's about sending a message You don't belong here and we don't want you to exist. And let me be blunt. The people pushing these laws are the ones who are truly unhinged. They love to label trans people as mentally ill, delusional, sick in the head. But think about this. If you've built your entire worldview around this irrational fear of trans people, if you created scenarios in your head that don't even exist, you are the one living in a delusion. When we focus on imaginary or made-up threats, you are ignoring the very real violence that trans people face every single day. And it's not just physical violence, it's actual systemic violence, because laws are being passed to strip away their rights, policies to force people into unsafe situations, and we are just creating a culture that treats them as less than human. And they actually hurt everyone, not just trans people, also cisgendered people who don't fit traditional gender norms. I mean, just look at what happened with Imam Khalif of Algeria this year. She was falsely accused of being trans at the Olympics and all over media. And she's not the only one who has experienced the same thing, who has been equally been mistreated and lied about. I'm going to be honest, I even saw people I know spreading these false lies online by sharing information and stories that she was trans just in order to spread their fears and bigotry. It's not the first and it won't be the last time. The hypocrisy in all of this is just, I can't take it. The same people who claim to care about safety are the ones making restrooms unsafe for trans people. They're the ones who dehumanize an entire group of people based on nothing but fear and ignorance. It's not about bathrooms. It's about controlling the narrative and using trans people as scapegoats to distract from real issues. So, now that we've dissected some of the myths, lies, absurdities, and harm caused by this targeting of trans people, I want to end on a constructive note. This isn't just about calling out the bigotry. That just isn't enough. It's about figuring out, how can we move forward? How do we help people break down their biases, confront their ignorance, and live in a world where everyone, including trans people, can exist without fear? So let me start by saying this. Unlearning bias is hard. It requires humility, self-awareness, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. But history has shown that change is possible. Just think back to the civil rights movement. There was a time when many white people genuinely believed that black people sharing public spaces was a threat. Yet those fears were rooted in ignorance and just perpetuated lies. But over time, as voices and activists challenged those beliefs and demanded visibility, things began to shift. Of course, racism still exists and there's a long way to go, but those same public spaces are no longer segregated. People learned slowly but surely that their fears had no basis in reality and that they were harmful, and their humanity was connected with the humanity of those that they were taught to fear. So the first step is education. Ignorance and fear thrives in silence. People fear what they don't understand. And when it comes to trans issues, honestly, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation. So here's my challenge. So to anyone who is listening who wants to make a difference, start learning. Seek out stories from trans people, listen to their experiences, read books, watch documentaries, follow trans creators on social media, be friends with trans people. The more you expose yourself to the reality of trans lives, the harder it does become to hold on to these unfounded fears. And parents, start early, teach your kids about diversity. Normalize the idea that gender isn't black and white. If we raise a generation of kids who don't see trans people as other or a threat, this fight just becomes a lot easier. Next, you have to do the hard work of challenging your own biases. And this isn't just for people who openly oppose trans rights. This is for everyone. We all have those blind spots. I'm sure that anyone has found themselves in a situation where you have made opinions, judgments, and thoughts have crossed your mind about a certain group of people just based on whatever is the stereotype, or maybe you even had a personal experience. But one person or a couple of people are not representative of a whole group or experience. So I want you to ask yourself, where do my beliefs about trans people come from? Is it personal experience, or are they just things other people have told me about trans people, or things I see in the media, sensationalize news and so-called facts? Do you actually know any trans people? If not, how can you claim to know what they're like? Bias is something that is like a weed. It grows when you ignore it. The more you question it, the weaker it gets. Also, empathy is a game changer. It's really hard to hate someone when you've heard their story, when you've looked them in the eye in person, and you're sitting across the table from them, and you've shared a meal or laughed with someone. If you have the chance, I encourage you to build relationships with all types of people in this world, including trans people. And if it just feels like too much or too daunting, then start small. Maybe attend a LGBT event, pride event, even in your own community. Volunteer for an organization that supports trans rights. Just be present and remember that empathy isn't feeling bad about someone or pitting someone. It's really about understanding them, about understanding humanity and seeing yourself in them. And another way we can make change is also to call out bigotry when we see it. If someone makes a joke at the expense of trans people, say something. If you see someone spreading misinformation, correct them. Trust me, I have found myself having to do this a lot in this last year. People just blatantly spreading wrong information. Go back to what I mentioned before about the Olympian this year who was accused of being trans when she's not. When you see that kind of stuff, you gotta call it out and say, this is not correct information. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It might cause tension, but just know that silence allows bigotry to thrive. And here's the thing, the person you're challenging probably may not even change their mind about the issue. And on a broader scale, if you can support policy changes, be someone who is in the know and advocating for laws that protect trans people and oppose those politicians who support to harm them. Every single year, we've recently had presidential election, but throughout the year, there's all kinds of people that are elected into office, whether it's senators or congressmen or even at the local level. Actually, the local level is even more important. Be aware of the people that are looking to represent the community. And if you find that there are people who are not protective of trans rights and actually looking to harm this community, then don't vote for them. Find out what is their position, what is their stances, and donate to organizations doing work to support trans rights if you can't do it yourself. Again, vote for leaders who believe in equality, who understand that public spaces belong to everyone. It's for the public, not just for certain people. Finally, I want you to think about the historical similarities. Just as society had to unlearn its fear of Black people in public spaces, it must now unlearn its fear of trans people because there is no facts or basis to back it up. The arguments being made against trans people today are very similar to those made against civil rights in the past. History has shown us the way forward, and this is the only way, which is rejecting fear and embracing one another, understanding that diversity is a strength, not a threat. So here's my challenge to you. Be part of the solution. Educate yourself, challenge your biases, be aware of them, and build empathy. I encourage you to call out bigotry and lies and support policies that protect everyone. This just isn't about trans rights, it's about human rights. And we want to create a world where fear no longer dictates how we treat one another. To those who are listening or listened and feel uncomfortable or unsure, remember, growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone or staying the same. It happens when you face your fears, question your beliefs, and open your heart to the possibility that the world is bigger and that everyone experiences this world and this life in different ways. And it's not up to me or to you to dictate or decide that one way is acceptable or not. And together we can grow for progress. So thank you for listening to this talk here today. And if you enjoyed it, if you found it helpful, share it with someone. Please feel free to share my videos anywhere, any platform that you like. And together we can make a difference. So be kind to yourself and to one another. Until next time.